Hello, I'm David Neil Lee. In my novel, The Midnight Games, the horrific Cthulhu mythos of H.P. Lovecraft turns out to be alive and well in contemporary Hamilton. I'm just finishing a sequel, The Medusa Deep, that's scheduled to come out in early in 2021. H.P. Lovecraft himself is a character in these books. He passed away in a cancer ward in Providence, Rhode Island in 1937. But here's a flashback from the Medusa Deep in which he did not die then and there at all. Instead, this happened. Visitors often came this late in the day, when darkness had settled over the hospital. Dutiful adults who, for one reason or another, did not really want to visit their parents in the terminal ward came to the terminal ward to visit their parents, knowing they'd soon be asked to leave. So when the last visitor, keep your eye on the clock, sir, you've got 20 minutes, closed the door on his way into the ward, the night nurse and the orderly weren't surprised. What an oddball, said the orderly, who should have been doing laundry or rinsing bedpans, not hanging around the front desk. That one came by earlier, the nurse said, with a whole passel of other oddballs. I teased Howard afterwards. I told him he must be quite the writer, since here in his illness, characters out of his storybooks are coming to see him. He told me he didn't really write books, the orderly said, just short stories. Anyway, the nurse said, this was quite the bunch. Some stuck-up foreigner with an accent, a young African girl with gold-rimmed glasses and a great crown of black hair, some awful-looking tramp wearing a coat like a pup tent, and then this feller who I swear to God is a genuine Red Indian. They must be good buddies, the orderly said. Only old ladies ever come to see Howard. They both shook their heads. They knew H.P. Lovecraft wouldn't be with them much longer. He told me the most awful story, the nurse said. Who, this Indian guy? No, Howard. Just yesterday. It seems that when he was little, his mamma always told him he was so ugly that when he was only 6 or 7 he would sneak out of the house at night, without his mother or his aunts knowing, and walk the streets and explore the old town. He'd hide in the shadows when anyone came. He thought he was so ugly that if they saw him, they'd be scared. He told me he liked to go to Prospect Park, but that one night something was there in the park, something waiting. Bullies, the orderly nodded. Worse yet, perverts. God damn them anyway. They should round them all up and... Much worse than that, the nurse continued. Howard says that crouching in the shadows of the big statue, there were things waiting for him, and these things, they scooped him up and took him, and... This is what he told me. They planted something in him. Yeah, I'll bet they did, said the orderly. The nurse was used to these conversations with the orderly, but something about Lovecraft's story had really got to her, given her a real chill, so she ignored the orderly's drivel. This thing, this seed, he says it's been growing in him ever since then, all his life, and now is ready to hatch. He insists that we cremate him. He says it's for safety, for the safety of everybody. He wants to be cremated. Well, that's for the family to decide, isn't it? Said the orderly, when they make the arrangements. The nurse shuddered. That's what's so eerie. He wants to be cremated now. If we wait until he dies, he says, it might be too late. So, who were these characters? The orderly asked. That was a long time ago, eh? Howard says they weren't human. I tell you, the way he described them, you won't ever get me near Prospect Park at night, not with a 10-foot pole. Howard still has nightmares about them. He's terrified that when this thing hatches, whether he's dead or alive, these things will come back and rip it out of his body and claim it for themselves and take it away and raise it for their own, and then... Anyway, the name he has for them is Night Gaunts. They sat in silence. Then the nurse pointed to the clock. The orderly headed towards the door. If I ain't back in 5 minutes, send out a posse, he chuckled. Night Gaunts. He opened the door of the terminal ward, but the nurse noticed that when he went inside, he left it open. Night had fallen outside the ward's barred windows. The long, clammy room, smelling of sweat and sickness, was full of whispers. People lowered their voices, as if afraid to awaken and goad into rage the death that slumbered and waited there. Around Lovecraft's cot, the curtain was drawn. Last call, gents, the orderly announced. He drew back the curtain. Time to... The cot was empty. and so was the chair beside it. The blankets had been thrown hastily aside, and Lovecraft's robe and slippers were gone, as was his tiny stack of bedside books. The old man in the next bed looked up with wide, astonished eyes, and raised a shaking arm, pointing at the window. The orderly went to the window and looked out. In the night sky, something like a cloud crossed the darkness, an invisible vapor that distorted the stars and then spread out and away. Beyond the tidy lawn, the line of trees waved as in a winter gale, and the orderly heard a tremendous hum, the engines of the night, swelling and fading into the black sky. He went back to the old man. "Where's Howard?" he asked. "Your neighbor there. Where the hell did he go?" "Something ripped off the bars," the old man gasped. "Something like a big octopus. Pulled 'em off like they was stuck up there with thumbtacks." The orderly sighed. Half the people in this place had lost their marbles, and they weren't ever getting them back. He repeated his question. "Where'd he go?" And the guy was with him. "Up the rope ladder." The old man pointed to the ceiling and fell back in the bed. "I'm telling you, it had the arms of the big suckers, an octopus. And that Indian feller, they took Howie up the rope ladder. It was a rope ladder to the moon."